I'm continuing to read Buddha by Tezuka Osamu, and I'm up to Volume 7, Prince, how do you say that? Ajatasattu. So this is Volume 7 out of 8 volumes, one volume left to go here. I don't have the other volumes with me because I've been returning them to the library as I finish them to give other people a chance to read them. This is, you can see it's a library book here. So, yeah, at this point in the series, Volume 7, I don't know if I have a lot to say other than repeating the kind of things that I've already said. Um, you know, a lot of the things I've already been saying about this series are true for this one. For example, I continue to be confused about the numbering. So this is Volume 7, Part 5 and Part 6. But I don't know. I guess maybe these are, maybe if I would pay more attention, I would realize there's themes in the different parts, different arcs. Because yes, certainly there is a storyline here that does get dropped after Part 5, the story of Prince Ajatasattu, which is a little strange given how that's the name that's given to this whole volume. And then Part 6 has nothing to do with, how do you say that name again? Ajatasattu. But yeah, so the numbering is a little bit confusing. The story, well, like I said in previous videos, I think I'm starting to enjoy this series more once I stop looking at it as a narrative whole and look at each of these as like an issue of a comic book. Because I think this was originally serialized in the Shonen comics in Japan back in I believe it was the late 70s and early 80s. So if you look at each chapter as just an issue which has its own story arc, and of course there are characters and themes that do have a through line, but each issue has its own story. Makes a lot more sense. Although certainly in this volume especially, we're going to be seeing that there's a lot of callbacks to stuff that were in earlier issues. There is something a little bit odd here, and I've bookmarked it here. And I'm not sure if this is just in my edition, but probably not, because I mean I don't know anything about how printers work, but I imagine this wouldn't be in just one book, right? This would have to be in multiple copies of this book, but the pages repeat. So we've got 137, and then we continue on, continue on, continue on, and then right when you get to 168, then all of a sudden we go back to 137. So you can see these pages are exactly the same. If it's in one copy of this book, it's got to be in multiple copies, right? So that means now, as far as I can tell, no pages are omitted. I was a little bit worried when I discovered this that there would be missing pages, but it just looks like pages 137 to 168 are just printed twice, because you go here and then these pages are all here twice. But then you get to 168 and the story continues as normal. Now, the other thing I've been saying all along as I've been reading this book, this series, is I've been discovering through research on Wikipedia that a lot of these characters in here, in this series, are from the original Buddhist mythology, the original Buddhist myth or the original histories. Sorry, I shouldn't say original because it becomes very apparent if you look at Wikipedia that there's multiple versions of all these stories, and it's just like, it's just a mess trying to make a narrative. Sorry, it appears to be just a mess trying to make a narrative out of the story of Buddha by going to the stuff on Wikipedia, because there's just a bunch of conflicting sources and stuff like that. That's the impression I get. But a lot of the characters who appear in here, for example, well, it's kind of all through, but here's an example. Buddha sends his disciple, what was his name? Ananda, out to find disciples. And Ananda, by the way, is somebody who, according to Wikipedia, really was one of Buddha's most prominent disciples. Although his story arc in this comic is completely different than what Wikipedia says about what we know about him from the original Buddhist legend. But then, these two people here, who Buddha says is now his future successors, Sariputta and Moggallana. And I went to Wikipedia to look these guys up, and they are both, again, from the original Buddhist myth, or the historical records, or whatever you want to call it. I didn't even bother to read the Wikipedia entry. I just know at this point that whatever Wikipedia has on these guys, it's going to bear almost no relation to what's in the comic. I just am at that point in my reading of this book. Now, even within the comic, it's a little bit strange because they kind of come out of nowhere. Ananda finds him on his journey. Buddha announces them as his successors. And then very quickly afterwards, they drop from the narrative again. Now, who knows if they'll show up much in book 8, but why are they Buddha's successors? They seem to have very little to do with them. You would expect his successors to be people he had spent a lot more time with, I guess. Although it does, Devadatta, who, according to, again, Wikipedia, is kind of like the Judas Iscariot of the Buddhist legend. He's a disciple of Buddha who turns against him and tries to kill him. Now, again, from what I can tell from Wikipedia, it doesn't appear to have much of a motive in the original myth, other than just being, I don't know, unless there's something I'm missing. But in this comic, they do give him a motive. He, from the very beginning, he came to become Buddha's disciple because he was attracted to the power of the organization. He's created this organization in which he's put himself on top. And then Buddha is announcing new successors. And he's very angry about it because he says he's the one who has shown the organizational skills. And Buddha rejects that. And so then I can only assume in the final book there's going to be some sort of confrontation with him. I think according to Wikipedia, in the original myth, he tried to kill Buddha by dropping a rock on him or something like that. So this gives him all the motivation to go from one of Buddha's disciples to Buddha's adversaries. Except there's this weird part here where I don't know what's going on here. I love you, Buddha, more than anyone else on earth. Honey, please. And I don't know if that's some sort of, who knows. Sometimes when you read something from a foreign country, some of the humor or context or coding doesn't always transfer over. I mean, I lived in Japan for 8 years, but I don't claim to have understood everything. Now, Devadatta is, even before this, clearly shown to not be a nice guy. And in fact, in the previous one, the storyline of Prince Ajatasattu, Devadatta is clearly manipulating things to control Devadatta and turn him against his father, even going so far as to kill the slave girl that Prince Ajatasattu is in love with. So he's clearly not a nice guy even beforehand, but he had envisioned himself as a leader within Buddha's organization up until this point. So the story about Prince Ajatasattu is another one of those things. He is a real historical person, or a quasi-historical, I guess, lived during the time of Buddha, according to Wikipedia, some sort of interaction with Buddhist myth. But all of the stuff he does in this comic appear to be just pure invention. So in this comic, he actually shoots Buddha with the arrow, tries to kill him. And Buddha survives, because of course he survives, although he's shown as being incapacitated for a long time. And I'm reading this and I thought, okay, this is too big of a narrative plot point to be purely invention. There's got to be something in the Buddhist mythology corresponding to this, where Buddha is shot with an arrow by Prince Ajatasattu. But I looked it up on Wikipedia, and this appears to be all just part of this comic. I mean, I don't know. Take everything I say with a grain of salt, because I'm not an expert. I've only done a cursory amount of research on Wikipedia. Let me know if I missed something. And that goes for everything I say throughout this review. So later, Buddha is visited with the vision of the Brahmin, who points out to him that he has not been fulfilling his mission of spreading his gospel, his enlightenment. So Buddha goes off with his disciple Ananda, and they travel through, and they have really tough conditions. But Buddha says, "I'm being tested by the heavens. The idle man of Vinuvana," Vinuvana, I guess, is where Buddha had his followers, is being forced to remember his days as an ascetic. I'll keep going, I must. Just think of it as an excellent trial for yourself as well. Okay. Now this confused me, because in an earlier volume of this story, of this comic, I thought that the message I was supposed to get out of the narrative was that trials were a false path. That Buddha, Siddhartha, had experimented with trials and then rejected them. There was a whole character arc about one of Buddha's followers who is... Sorry, I'm looking for a picture of him now. The monk who burnt out his eye. And how he had tried to achieve enlightenment through trials, and that it was just something that Buddha had realized was useless, but now he seems to be advocating it again. And not just here, but later. Let me see if I can find the page. When Buddha meets his son, and his son is suffering as a slave, Buddha says, this is a very good trial for you. Let me see if I can find it. So this is where he's meeting his son. Somewhere later, he counsels his son that suffering as a slave is going to be a very good trial for him. Oh yeah, maybe it's over here. Yeah. But dear, if he stays here, he'll almost certainly die. The Koslans know that Rahulu is royalty, so they treat him horribly, giving him tough chores. That's your trial, don't you see? Persevere. So, I don't know. Maybe I missed something. I mean, I'm going to come back to a criticism I've made before, which is I don't think this comic is doing a very good job of explaining the philosophy of Buddhism at all. Maybe I'm missing something. I mean, I'm not saying that Buddhism is a hollow philosophy. I'm just saying that it's not being really explained well in this comic. I mean, here we go. Buddha's giving a sermon. He says, to release yourselves from pain, you should follow the Eightfold Path. Now, I vaguely remember hearing about an Eightfold Path before. So, okay, so what are the steps? And he says, you must see rightly, think rightly, speak rightly, work rightly, live rightly, strive rightly, pray rightly, and stay right. So in other words, just be a good person. Well, that's not very deep or insightful. I mean, we don't need some sort of enlightened monk, chosen one to spread this gospel, right? I mean, I get it as far as it goes. If you try to live a good life, there is a certain peace of mind that comes from that will help you persevere when life gets difficult. Just the knowledge that you've done everything right as best as you could. But you know, the whole framing of this comic, the story, is that there are all these monks trying to figure out the best way to live, and nobody could find it out until Buddha did. But then that's all Buddha has to say. I mean, you know, to be perfectly fair, he does expand on that in different sermons elsewhere in this comic. I think in the previous volume, maybe it was a couple volumes ago, I don't remember, he gave some parallels on minimizing desire. But yeah. So anyways, there's a lot of story arcs or characters from past stories that make reappearances here. There's what's the name of this woman again? I can never remember anybody's names. They all have strange names. Strange, I mean, to my Western ears. This one was... what was her name? Oh yeah, here's her name. Visakha. Who again, according to Wikipedia, was one of the historical followers of Buddha, or I don't know, quasi-mythical followers of Buddha. But, sorry, quasi-historical followers of Buddha is what I meant to say. Although I guess quasi-mythical is the same thing, isn't it? But, yeah, none of this here about her losing her mind and stuff like that do I remember seeing on the Wikipedia page. So it seems to be an invention here. And then the encounter with the Crystal Prince. So Buddha goes back to his hometown, his home, and finds it under occupation by the Crystal Prince. So this is something I've talked about in previous volumes in these video reviews, because it was something that was established, the conquest of Buddha's hometown by this Crystal Prince. And again, this doesn't appear to be the way it actually happened, either in history or in the myth or anything. So this again is pure invention. I mean, there really was a crystal prince, and there really was a Shakya, and there really was a Kosala, but crystal prince didn't conquer Buddha's homeland and put Buddha's son, so Buddha's son, Rahula, is another person that's, again, right from the original myth, but there's nothing about him being a slave in an occupied land because the crystal prince took it over. So, again, unless I'm missing something because it's not in Wikipedia, this is largely just an invented story to add more drama here. It does remind me of, I grew up Christian. A lot of the historical fiction around the time of Jesus that you hear in the Christian church, or even some of it from the historical record, I guess. The conflicts. So Buddha's hometown is people are under occupation and have been turned into slaves, and there are zealots planning a revolt. But Buddha is not. They expect Buddha to. They originally expect Buddha to help them or to inspire the people, but Buddha is having nothing of this political revolt. He's purely uninterested in the political question. He's just interested in saving people's souls. So, of course, if you know anything about the Christian story or a lot of the historical fiction, usually comes out of it. The Jewish revolts going on and Simon the Zealots and all that kind of stuff. But Jesus is not interested in any of the political questions. He's just interested in the kingdom of God. Now, I wonder how much of this, because this appears to be all made up, how much of this is just inspired by the story of Jesus, or how much of this is just, that there are only 8 stories that only ever get repeated all over again, or whatever that number is. The ending. The ending is quite interesting. So the Crystal Prince, there's a political revolt that's brewing, but the Crystal Prince, who's been portrayed as a bad guy throughout this whole series, finally comes to see the light. Buddha converts him, and he ends the occupation of Buddha's country. So leaving only a small detachment, the Kosalan army evacuated as promised. So that's good, right? Well, apparently not. It says that this would cause an irrevocable tragedy neither Buddha nor Prince Crystal could foresee. And that's the end of Volume 7. So, that's definitely got my interest up for Volume 8. We'll see what happens in Volume 8. Sorry, I'm probably being too critical in my reviews here. I'm just complaining about stuff. And, there is certainly stuff you could complain about or nitpick about all through this, as I think is true with a lot of Tezuka Osamu's stuff. It's not flawless by any means, but he was a beloved storyteller for a reason. You can see that the art is very good. Or achieves the I don't know what an art teacher would say about that comment, but it's quite attractive. You can definitely see why he was called the Walt Disney of Japan. It's quite readable. So, I don't mean to just complain about stuff. I'm been more or less enjoying my read-through of this. And, last volume, and then done.